What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and this is another episode of the Facts Project. Today, special guest, Aaron Dowen from Catalyst Comics, creator of Tilt. Thank you for being here, sir. Also, fellow podcaster for the Beard and Comics podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for the shout out. We actually just announced that we put Beards and Comics podcast on hiatus.
So. No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, look, man, sometimes you need that break, because I've done it myself.
It's a podcast that was really about the industry or being involved in small press and indie comics. And we felt like we were starting to hit that point where we were going to start circling back around to stuff. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want to be that. So we stopped that. But we do have Dementophobia podcast, which is the one that we're putting more effort into. And that's just us reading through random flash fiction.
Really?
And just having a blast. So whenever we find a cool flash fiction story, we kind of read through it and joke around about it.
Now, for those people that do not understand what flash fiction is, what do you describe it as?
Yeah, so flash fiction is the ones that we lean toward are just real independent writers, just anyone who gets online and we use flashfiction.net because it's the biggest one. And we'll pick in a genre like the one we're just finishing up is Power Rangers. And so it's an old one from like 2006. It's like Power Rangers, Dino Thunder Neo. And we try to find somebody that's not a well-known writer and but someone that has good reviews. And we just read through their story and have fun with it.
Really? Now, is that sort of in relevance to fan fiction?
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you, man. Hey, look, for one, thank you again for being here today. So you actually gave me an opportunity to basically read through a character story series, of course, of superhero origin by the name of Tilt. And you're within your fourth issue that you'll be releasing pretty soon. And I am enamored by the story. Like I've actually gotten a chance to read through the book, I'd say maybe around like 3 times. And I came up with a boatload of questions because of course, out of a lot of things and a lot of the stories I read, I like to basically pick the creator's brain as to why they went there and why they chose to basically write the series in which that they write, and generally pretty much want to understand that is as far as the main character and the main storyline that's brought out there. You pretty much want to understand exactly where the creator's mindset is in making that character and why they did. So to get into it, what year did you start the series?
I penned it in 2015.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's been a minute, but this was before any ideas of ever even wanting to release a comic book. It was just something that I did because I've always been a writer. So.
Right. Now when you essentially put this together, were you like free writing it at first and then you just didn't realize how far you had gotten and it just came up that way?
Well, I wrote Paradigm was the first character that I wrote, and that was our first comic book that we released. And I had a bunch of notes of really cool things I thought would have been fun. Then I realized they didn't fit with that character. His name is Ben, but it just didn't fit with who he was as a personality. And so I took all of those, and they're pretty much what became Tilt. And then I sat down and I wrote all 4 issues of Paradigm and all 4 issues of Tilt at the same time. So they're all kind of integrated as well, but it was really just a bunch of leftover notes that I thought would make a really fun character.
Now, generally, if you're writing 2 storylines at the same time, is there some sort of intersectionality between the 2 stories, or would you say that they're completely separate?
They are not separate at all. And we have a couple different sections to Catalyst Comics, and there's the Uprising, which is creator owned. They're like One Last Job's the last one that we've put out, and that's just a spy thriller. We have a horror book called Welcome to Everville, and we have anything that's not connected goes in that. But anything that is connected is part of the Catalyst Comics universe, and that's Paradigm, Tilt, Shift, and Sage, which we haven't put out yet, and then Silhouette. And so far, Silhouette has just been seen in a short story that's available on Amazon still, I believe.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So basically you put this together in 2015. Now, did it all come in one hit, or pretty much you started putting it together in sections? Now, when When I read it, like it seems like it's a continuing story. It definitely does. So
Yeah.
like, was all 4 issues in one hit, and then you just chose to separate them by the comics in which the issues were given?
Yeah, absolutely. So they were all together, and I was still learning how to. I had no idea anything about the comic book world, how laying out books works, anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like I got lucky with the first issue, and that people just vibed with the character, and so it'll. I also had a good team behind it, so that'll just get better when we remaster it for the trade. But yeah, I sat down and wrote the whole storyline out together. It's the same thing that I did with Paradigm's first story arc, and I try to do that as much as I can. Though on some stories and other comic books, I want to kind of do it piece by piece.
Mm.
Whereas this one, I went hard for the whole thing.
Nice, nice. And when exactly did you put together the idea that you could possibly take within this entire story in what you read, what you wrote, that you would chop it up and put it in a comic?
Yeah. So once it was written out, I was just paneling and paging it. Um, of course, as you start publishing and paying to get these comic books made, you have to start scaling some of that stuff back. So there is other content that'll never really be seen from Tilt, that were just kind of extra pages that went with the stories. And that really just comes down to, once you want to break it down into issues, how many issues is it going to make? I've told people a lot that I like 4 issue story arcs,
Right.
because I feel like you don't have fluff comics. I feel like in a lot of contemporary writing, there's 6, 8, 12,
Mhm.
and you get a really strong first issue, and it always ends with the same way, with the kind of revelation of the villain at the end of the first one, and then a strong second issue that's going to talk about the villain, and then a whole bunch of fluff until like the last half of the next to last one and the final issue. So I thought to myself, like, how much could I take into 4 issues and still develop a character that people love,
Right.
while giving him the momentum that I would rather him have, rather than having a sprawled out story that just has a bunch of fluff in it.
So by you saying that, for the most part, that you don't necessarily find any need for filler issues, or better yet, filler episodes, or in that faith, would you say that you're a fan of the Disney Plus shows because they only give you about 4 to 6 issues a
You
piece?
know, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Anybody wants more content,
Right.
but that's a good thing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, especially as somebody that makes comic books and sells them, I would rather somebody be like, I remember, because I had someone review all the stuff we had done last year, and they talked about both the short stories that or not short stories, I guess they're novelettes that I had put out, and they were like, the part that made me mad about it was I wanted there to be more. I was like, I did my job then. that's that's the best compliment I could get, is that you wanted more of it.
The whole point of comic books is that there's always an epic cliffhanger at the end that
Yes.
always wants you either wanting the next issue, or when the story is completely done, wants the customer or the audience to want more.
Right. Yeah, and Tilt is the play on tropes. That was his whole generation. That's how he kind of came about, was just, let me play off a bunch of these superhero tropes that we've all seen time and time again. And I don't know if you have anything in there later about it, but just things like going into 3 different suits within the first like 2 issues.
I did see that. Yes.
Yeah. And that's just a play on superheroes changing their suits all the time. It's fun for me to kind of take those things that I grew up in, things that I love. And superhero comic books aren't easy right now, because not a lot of people want to get invested in new superheroes.
Mhm.
They pretty much have their staples within the big two. But once you get into small press and indie, it's a little bit more difficult to get them in front of people. Um, but we've been kind of gradually growing that audience, so it's been a fun thing to watch.
Good, good. So, in essence, outside of the character Tilt himself, who, for the most part, is the person, Patrick E. Tilt?
Yeah, so Patrick, um, one of the enjoyable things about him and his personality is that he was taken when he was 15. I mean, he was a teenager, right in the middle of the teens, and taken and experimented on, turned into a mercenary. So pretty much his life stopped at 15. And so when we see him later in the book, once he gets free of that and he gets contact with Cindy, you could see that kind of weird like he's still a teenager mindset while he's trying to flirt, but he's not good at it and he's not really sure. Like he's super jacked, but I don't think he really realizes that.
Mm-hmm.
So just that playful mindset of like, let me take this character and still treat him like he's 15 in his mind, even though he's, in his 30s now.
Got you. And even so, like upon the first time you actually like see him in a panel, he effortlessly does not have an apartment. He's pretty much
Right.
living on the streets.
Right.
He's hitching rides on planes. Like
Yep.
he's doing everything outside of the. I mean, he doesn't seem like he's depressed by his situation. He
Hmm.
pretty much is comfortable in his own skin.
Or at least trying to sound that way.
Right.
And that's kind of the way I was trying to play it was I wanted the reader to think like either he really is comfortable in his own skin or he just really wants to be comfortable in his own skin.
Mm, got you. Now, as you spoke on earlier, where Patrick basically was taken away from his parents at 15. This wasn't voluntary for him. I mean, pretty much as far as the aspect goes, where he was being shipped away. His parents didn't necessarily feel a need for them to visit him anymore. That was pretty much the end of their upbringing of Patrick. It was like, okay, my kid has hero powers, but this is scary. So
Exactly.
I'm gonna let this kid go. So where other parents were pretty much it's in other superhero stories where they're trying to basically shield their children from the powers and how the access to it could be dangerous to others. Patrick's got rid of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we may someday find out and explore why that was the decision that they made. But within the universe itself, it's still new. It's new, but it's not new. It's hyper evolution is what we call it, which is it's similar in essence to like the mutant gene for X-Men. So it's shown in some people, but not everybody. But it's starting to pick up its pace, and so we'll start seeing it more and more. One of the short stories that I did was called Fire by Night, and that was set in medieval times. And so the powers have been around for forever. They just are starting to become more prominent and more known. And that's like the birth of the Council of Elders that we'll talk about a little bit later.
Nice, nice. Now, as far as that, as far as like the writing style that you see from Patrick in the early first issue, one thing that you do realize is that within your writing is that Patrick is pretty much breaking the fourth wall.
Mhm.
He is finding times to narrate the origin of his story through the audience by talking to them.
Right.
As far as an author, and in writing in such a way, like how is it when you have to like pretty much have a conversation with the audience without necessarily as you're writing it, is it almost like I have to come up with a conversation and possibly answer on the other side like, hey guys, you understand that I would do this, right?
Right. I mean, in the things that you say or that Patrick says, he's trying to. I shouldn't say in the things that Patrick says because it's the most honest style of writing that I do is within the Tilt story because it's more of how I would write if people will like read my blogs or things like that, where it's more of conversational. It's more directly to you. And for him, I wanted that same element. Like, how can I make him connect with the audience? But because I'm a writer, there's still ways that you kind of lead people to a certain thought, and that'll help progress the stories as well. Because I'm sure you've read all kinds of different comics, but there are comics that try it and are very poor at doing it. And so they kind of just leave you just kind of confused on what the purpose was and
Mhm.
who they were actually talking to. And that was a hard task in the beginning. Like I said, we came into this stuff fresh, not really knowing much about making comics, and had to explore the use of like you have him narrating his own story, but you also have him talking to the audience, and you have like just normal conversations with characters that aren't breaking the fourth wall.
Mhm.
So how do you use narrative bubbles, speech bubbles, caption bubbles?
This is true.
um, it was a lot of work, but I think we kind of found the balance. And then sometimes you just do random add-ins later on where like there's the part in the first one where he's walking down the street and that person will walk by him and they're just like, who is he talking to? Just kind of things to pull you a little bit more into his reality.
Do you feel like as far as when you're writing out those comics, do you feel like as opposed to like writing in such a way that basically you're narrating to the audience, is it difficult for the letterer as far as the aspects of how you're writing it to capture thought versus actual speech?
I'll say with Tilt, I lettered the first three.
Okay.
And that's why you'll notice the fourth one looks so good. And so when we get to, we're going to have, 1 through 3 all relettered before we go and make the trade. But I was curious about that myself. And so when we hired Dave Lentz to do lettering on issue 4, we only had maybe 2 different things that he asked me about as far as like directional, who he was speaking to. Other than that, he seemed to have grasped it pretty quick. And I don't know if it's just because he's a letterer by trade. But I mean, he did a fantastic job with it. So I have no complaints.
Is there a signature favorite character that you had necessarily went to possibly for inspiration of how to write in this way of breaking the fourth wall?
Mm, Not particularly. I think it was a blend of one of the guys that we used to talk to a lot. He had described Tilt as Superman if Superman didn't give a shit,
Mhm.
and that's pretty much what my thought process was creating Tilt. But I just had that element. Like I said, I had a bunch of notes from Paradigm, and one of them was like, should he talk to the audience? And then, of course, once you make that decision, you have to go read the books where they do. And of course, Deadpool is one of the top ones who
Yeah.
actually, breaks the fourth wall. Um, and it's just more enjoyable. It's more so a flip on narration than anything else.
Really true. Definitely. So to get a little bit deep into the story, one of the first people that pretty much Tilt feels the need to reintroduce himself to, upon him leaving the council and the council of, well, I can't say he's leaving the council of elders, but he works within the council. Is a gentleman, of course, that knows him, or better yet, thinks knows him far too
Hmm.
well, and it's exquisite. So
Hmm.
it's the gentleman who basically took him away from his family in the first issue, and he pretty much reintroduces himself by crashing right through his window, Lex Luthor style,
That's right.
and confronting him head on,
Yeah.
as far as like some needed answers. Because how much, if you could say from an author standpoint, how much time has passed since Tilt has left the council and to present day?
Yeah. So I think when we first pick up, it's a little bit of time. I think it's a couple of years that he's been out, but he's just been homeless and kind of trying to figure out life. But at some point, he makes that decision like, I need to figure out who's kind of pulling all these strings. And of course, the more that you're out of that stuff, the more you think back to the stuff that tore you apart and tore you from your family and all that.
Mhm.
And so his only point of contact he ever knew outside of, you'll notice that you never see the council of elders. He knew, like, Tilt knew he worked for them, but he didn't know who they were personally.
Right.
um and that's kind of the whole element of who they are. But he knew Exquisite because Exquisite's the one that would come and take the kids to the council. So that's his first point of contact, so that's exactly where he went.
Mm. Now, necessarily in coming in first contact with Exquisite, he finds it surprising that
Hmm.
Exquisite is pretty much like trying to help him a little bit. Like it's almost like he's like not saying he's like forgiving or anything like that.
Hmm.
He's more so just it was like, yeah, sure, I'll help you. But first, these are the ways to do it. Like
Right.
he kind of gives him tasks.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I enjoyed about writing that part was, I think when people see him break through the window and they know who it is that he's talking to as the person that took him, that they think that that entire experience with the two of them together is going to go a completely different way. But instead, you find out Exquisite isn't maybe who you thought he was. Just by the random notion of him taking kids and giving them to the council. But no, I mean, Exquisite's a billionaire. And he pretty plainly says it's not because of the council. So he feels he has a little bit of authority to play both sides. And so in his mind, that's why he does the analogies of the chess and the chessboard and kings and pawns, is because he's talking about trying to balance things out. He doesn't want the council to get too much power because that might infringe on him and his company. And he
Mm.
doesn't want hyper evos to just completely take over the council, because that is still a connection that's, global.
Now, in some type of small conversations that he's had with his secretary, I believe her name is Ashley,
Hmm.
correct? He references the cure
Hmm.
as to something that he's looking for. Now, is it in correspondence with it, that is it that there's so many supers out there that he's trying to turn everybody back to normal, or
It's
is that
actually it's a little bit more nuanced and a little bit deeper than that.
hmm,
And we're not going to explore it until the next story arc, because after issue 4, Tilt will continue. It's just
yeah.
kind of stopped until everything else catches up with it. But Exquisite does have hyper evolution. He can sense deficiencies. He can sense what things are wrong with people, and he kind of calls Exquisite out on that.
I
It's
saw
like
that.
you're
Yeah.
having too much salt in your diet or whatever. And so that conversation was him and Ashley. Like, something's wrong with Ashley that he's trying to help her figure out a cure for. Now, in Paradigm, as that storyline progresses, you'll see that there is something different about the blood in Hyper Evos that they're trying to figure out, and something to do with how the council finds these people.
Mm, okay. See, did not know that. That
That's
makes it a
right.
lot more intriguing. So essentially, because Exquisite, of course, is a billionaire, he seems to be operating independently. Is he
Mhm.
still working for the council?
He's not. He's never worked for the council.
Got you.
He's always just had one hand with them. Um, Same with the Hyper Evos. As far as we know, once we read Tilt, it seems like he really is in both sides.
Mhm.
Um, so how much of that is he manipulating, and how much of it is him trying to keep a grasp on something? That's just something to be explored. But I'll say the second story arc. I mean, you read the end of the 4th issue, so it kind of ends with like a crap's probably about to hit the fan when the next story
Yeah.
picks up. Um, and I'll say by the end of that story arc, um, I'll call it almost like a chessboard reset.
Mm,
So things we thought we're comfortable with, they're all going to get messed up.
got you. So as far as like when we get, I think when I got to the second issue, you
Mhm.
come to meet a character by the name of Cindy, who is also a hyper evo, if I'm correct.
She's not. She is. She's
Not.
just that R&D lady from Exquisite's Place in the first book, and she makes cool tech, and so she keeps her own tech, and I think it kind of elevates her character a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
See that I was confused by that as well. Okay. So upon looking at basically the definition of, I guess, the power set that
Hmm.
Tilt has, he's coming to find out a lot more about himself by the interactions that he's having physically.
Hmm.
So like when he goes under there's a drone attack
Hmm.
that happens while he's asleep.
Right.
He gets shot up,
Oh yeah.
and he turns out to have a manipulative healing factor.
Yes. And that is another play on tropes, and that's why he even says like, "Oh, that's convenient." And it's just my way of messing with, I don't know, the big two, I guess.
Yeah.
But I thought it's still humorous with his character, and it's just who Patrick is he's going to call these things out and talk about them. But yeah, so he's still kind of discovering the own extent of his powers, because the only powers that he's had exploited were the ones that they used for mercenary purposes. So you can tell he's probably not someone who's been shot at a whole lot,
Yeah.
as or in the sense of like actually in true harm's way, because he seems cocky and boastful for the most part.
Well, to piggyback off you said, there's obviously somebody who's definitely been the brunt of being the shield of a lot of bullets, and
Yep,
that just so happens to be his former partner,
that's right.
Kalen.
That's right.
So and in saying so that much, was it meant to be that basically were they partners, or were they more so set up to be on the same missions?
They were. I would say that they were mercenaries uh, partners in whatever sense you would want to use the term partners. It's
Mhm.
obvious that they had done missions together and they thought they knew each other fairly well, well enough to have the conversations that they had. But yeah, so I don't know if there's like mercenary duos, but I guess they were just the ones that got sent on missions together a lot.
Got you. And ultimately, Tilts comes to think that he might have met his demise in one of their prior missions.
Mhm.
But essentially, in the conversations that Talon and Tilt had amongst themselves, it seems as though that not necessarily that Talon was ever jealous of Tilt. He was more so, he seemed like he was totally against the council at first. Was definitely making fun of the fact that Tilt was pretty much like a company boy, or better
Yeah.
yet, he was the golden boy of the operation.
Right.
And better yet, it kind of seemed like Talon was more so expendable than anything.
Yeah, so when we see the flashback sequence that you're referencing, it's almost like you can tell that Taylor was probably the bad boy, and he was always kind of causing some kind of issue that the council has to clean up. And then we see him do it again then, and so it's pretty much just the council's last straw.
Hmm.
So Talon is a hyper evo as well, and he's another one whose powers aren't completely explored yet. But it kind of sets that up to where we can see that the council's just done with it, and as far as Talon knows, like Tilt's involved.
Mm. So then again, when they pretty much reintroduce themselves to each other, like as far as the attack on Tilt,
Hmm.
whether it was the drone attack in the beginning, or whether it was the first time where basically Tilt had seen Talon for the first time, where they actually
Hmm.
get into a confrontation. Is it more so that Talon is seeing him as still working for the council?
Yes, I think that Talon's interpretation is that um, Tilt is still with the council, and that somehow that's going to come back to haunt him because of his past.
Mm. And better yet, like he has a couple a couple of physical confrontations with him, and it's not like Talon's a slouch. He pretty much like understands how to combat Tilt
Oh, for sure.
on an
Yeah.
extreme edge. The biggest thing that I guess I can see from Tilt's point of view, aside from the fact that he has a healing quality, he's not immortal.
No.
Not by any case or anything.
Yeah.
He definitely bleeds. I mean, damn, he caught a knife through the bicep. So I've seen him shot
He's
plenty of
been he
times.
got poisoned.
Yeah, he got poisoned,
Yeah.
shot with a tranquilizer dart.
Yep.
Lord knows how he got out of that situation. Um, but it definitely seems like aside from Talon, that I'm not sure if Talon has a healing quality or anything like that, because he was getting worked in episode 3. But for the most part, it looked like Tilt was getting the brunt of the punishment that Talon was giving him.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted it to be when you have an overpowered character, because that's exactly what Tilt is an overpowered character, just like Superman is.
Yep.
You have to have some other edge for the villain. And for me, it was, well, let me explore that past a little bit,
Hmm.
because I think any good villain has qualities that a reader can identify with,
Right.
to where you could read his side of the story and be like, I kind of understand why he feels that way. Um, Even though the villain might take it to an extreme, but it's just a part of who he is as a person. But I wanted to make sure that he could somehow be able to withstand that fight with Tilt and still hold his own ground, and he absolutely does.
That's definitely true. Now more so, it feels like within the 4 issues in which I read, it feels like it feels like a mystery story. Um, the way that I see it is, it upon Tilt's objective and his end goal as trying to figure out his past and who basically has molded him into the person that we now know as Tilt. Is that more the end game, that he's just trying to figure out his past, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, so his thing right now is tearing down the council, and that's what we're going to explore throughout all of his story arcs. As far as the Catalyst Comics universe goes, I think I counted and it was 42. There's at some point going to be 42 issues that are all within that same universe that lead up to the crossover.
Mm.
And then the crossover is going to be the special event that has Shift, Sage, Silhouette, Paradigm, Tilt, Cindy or Sprocket, Exquisite's involved, like Quantum. There's another character, like just a bunch of all of them together. And then what I have planned for, if we can ever hit that in my lifetime, what I have planned for that next step after that, I think will leave people kind of like, I can't believe they would do that with Tilt.
Oh
So
man.
that's kind of my goal, is to make people scratch their heads with stuff.
Yeah, because amidst the experimentations, there had to be like, I guess, some DNA swapping or anything like that. So I'm pretty much like looking at a way, are they trying to duplicate Hyper Evos as far as like what the future is pretty much going to build, or is the Council of Elders pretty much trying to build their own army of them, not only utilizing them as mercenaries, but pretty much garnering up the fact that they can build their own army?
Yeah, and what we'll discover is that the council elders, they've always been there, and their hands are everywhere across the globe in all kinds of different awful things. For instance, that Silhouette Shadow Game short story is centered around Silhouette. Actually, the story is told from the point of view of the villain, who's the person that's sent to hunt down Silhouette.
Mm.
But you discover in the course of it that Silhouette is actually hunting for her sister, who was sold into trafficking.
Uh,
And so we discover that the council is, some branch of the council is involved with trafficking.
mm.
Because I mean, if the council is going to operate, they're going to do the things that make the most money. And they're also not a good organization, so they're going to do not good things.
Wow. So does it seem like as far as how the story was written, is somebody not giving us their entire personality, or better yet, their whole story? Because it
Nobody is.
nobody is.
Nobody has.
Not even Cindy, and she got shot.
Yeah, no, not even Cindy.
Oh my God. That's horrible. And I like the a la to the business card getting thrown on her back.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Thought that was a good touch. That was a good
Thanks.
touch. Necessarily, like as far as issue 4, when are you looking to release that?
Yeah, so I'm waiting, and I'm comfortable waiting now.
Okay.
I'm trying to do things very different this time. Like I said, superhero stuff is more difficult. It's been the more difficult things that we've done on campaigns, whereas we did, like a dark fantasy horror that was Welcome to Everville, and at the time that outperformed a lot more
Mm,
percentagely. And then we did One Last Job 1, and then One Last Job 2, and both of those have outperformed any superhero stuff we've done. Um, so in the course of that, this book is already almost a year past when it was supposed to, in our minds, come out,
mm,
um, for what our plan was for it. But at the same time, 2021 was when we started giving issue 1 away for free on our website. And we noticed a huge growth in our email base, and the fan base for Tilt. And we just want to kind of capitalize as much as we can on that, and let the growth happen before we launch, rather than hoping that we just have a good launch and then try to find growth throughout the mix of it. This will be our 7th campaign, so I'm
really,
just trying to do stuff a little bit smarter.
for sure. Now, as far as like within the sneak peek, that's pretty much if I can say so, the sneak peek that's given in issue 4. Now, Talon and Tilt, of course, worked as mercenaries for the council. And we get introduced to a newer character at the end of issue 4 that is more so now the newest mercenary that has pretty much been entered into the fold. And is it going to be up to Tilt and Talon to basically let this guy know that he's just being used the entire time? Or is there more to him?
There's more to him, and there's more to what his own personal plans are. Um, I'm fairly comfortable saying, because I think it's a fun thing to leave, is that we've met the council, but now we're about to see that there's war within the council.
Mm,
Um, and so he's a central figure in a lot of that. But he comes to kind of destroy the world, or destroy their world, Tilt's world,
right.
and all those characters. Like I said, at the end of that next story arc, it's pretty much like hitting a reset button. And he's going to be one of the central figures in that.
So are we seeing this character as pretty much looking at the council as kind of like the old guard, and it's kind of like a destroy and rebuild opportunity for him to basically like take the reins a little bit?
He's gonna try.
Okay. All right. So Aaron, what are you reading right now as far as comics are concerned?
Yeah, so we had been the last thing we tried on the Beards and Comics podcast. We started going through books with the audience, but I've been reading more of the classic stuff.
Okay.
So there's not a whole lot of new stuff that is kind of catching me, especially in the superhero worlds. Um, I did enjoy the Power Rangers universe stuff.
Did you?
Yeah, and it's probably because I didn't know it.
Is that the IDW Power Rangers ones that they put out?
It's they're with I think it's Boom now.
That's
Yeah,
right. It is
Boom.
them now. Yep.
Yeah, Boom themselves they have a fantastic list of different titles. So
It's true.
um, they're kind of hitting the nail on the head right now. But other than that, I read a lot of indie stuff. Like one of my friends, Mike Teener, he puts out a lot of good books like Midnight Highway. And one of my favorite indie series is Black Jackets, and he just kind of released the fifth issue of that. But yeah, I try to keep smaller press and indie, and then if I see anything on the bigger guys that seems to spark my interest, then I grab it.
Is there any specific genre that you enjoy reading more than most?
Well, no, not really.
Oh,
um,
okay.
I'm kind of all over the place. Of course, one of the last things that I read was I read through was Doug Wagner's Vinyl series. So he became a good friend of mine, and him and I talk a lot now. But he put out Plastic back in the day, and that was like his big one. And that was all about a serial killer and just a wild story. And so Vinyl is kind of like a sequel ish thing where it's set in the same universe as that. But that's very much like horror slash mob, I guess would be the best
Wow.
way I could describe it. It's a
Okay.
fun thing though. But yeah, I have no set thing that I read. I used to read pretty much exclusively superhero stuff, but there's been too many reboots, and I just kind of already know where the stories are going. Um, but I still watch the shows.
Definitely. So if anybody wanted to get their hand on the catalog as far as Catalyst Comics is concerned, how can they do so?
Yeah, catalystcomicstudio.com is the easiest way to do it. Everything we put out so far is on there. You can find some of my short stories on Amazon, like Barnes and Noble, stuff like that. But all of it's still available right on our website. And like I said earlier, Tilt number one is free. People can just go on there, and it's right at the top of our main page. It'll say, "Do you want this?" And you just hit the button and put in your email, and we'll email you the copy of Tilt number one.
Definitely. So for all of us here at the Facts Project, I mean, I appreciate you being on here, and definitely want to look forward to exactly the universe that you're building, especially with Tilt Paradigm and the rest of the Catalyst Comics catalog, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. If you're into other stuff, like I don't know if you're into like dark fantasy and stuff, but I'll send you some stuff over. I don't care.
Anything.
Yeah.
I run the gauntlet, so I'm almost I'm in the same boat as you. But for myself, James Grandmaster Facts voice, Aaron Dowen, thank you for being here. This has been great, and we are out.